Hey everybody, Chris Armiger, Fort Myers Beach Fire. I just wanted to apologize for the delay in posting my video. I'm on a double, and at the station they've now restricted our bandwidth, so I can't upload from the station. It takes like hours to upload to YouTube. So I did it on my double, but I'm just uploading it today now that I'm home. So anyway, I did the case study on the Virginia Tech Massacre 2007 for this module. The reason I did this one was because as I read through some of the case studies, a lot of the discussion points are things that we've covered extensively throughout the text already. But one of the points I think with this one versus the others that's worth talking about is the fact that you have essentially you have a primary scene and then a secondary scene and the potential for tertiary scenes beyond that, So I think that that's something that is often overlooked in response to incidents, not just criminal incidents, where it's certainly the most likely and most dangerous when you have these sort of like shootings, bombings, explosions, stuff that you might consider to be terroristic in nature. Then you want to be high alert for secondary devices, certainly. Less for natural incidents, but in any circumstance, if you make it part of your normal protocol or your algorithm in your head when you respond to these things, or you're having discussions or planning efforts or anything regarded to these sort of scenarios, then you're less likely to miss something. So we'll start with stage one of the disaster. It says on Monday, April 16th at 8 a.m., you, as the president of the university, were made aware that there was a shooting on campus, and you have 2 students that have been killed in their dorm room or their living area. And the suspicion is, or probably a better word is the assumption is, that it was a domestic incident. But what's curious is the details, and the detail is that they were obviously shot and killed, and there's no weapon on scene. But it's being brought to your attention, and it's being addressed and considered as some sort of domestic incident, and nothing really beyond that. So in the back of your mind, and really in the front of your mind, you should immediately consider, well, there's no gun on the scene, and it's unclear if the president knew that immediately or what the timeline was that he or she was given that information. But so it says, what's your plan of action? Well, my plan of action, if it were me, would be to find out, okay, well, where's the gun or guns? Where's the shooter? So you'll find out immediately that they have no one in custody, and that the police are investigating and still working the scene. That's at 8 a.m. So then you fast forward to, or step back real quick before you do that. So it says, what's your communication plan? So what's takeaway from this case study is the communication plan for the campus at this time in 2007 was an email system. So they had about 36,000 students that received an email that said that there was something going on campus, but nothing overly specific, and that they had no one in custody at the time. So, and then it goes to, what resources do you need? If you're not thinking that there might be a second event or a larger event, then you're not likely to call for a tremendous amount of resources. As the university president, you're obviously going to want to contact campus security, and then whatever responding agencies you would have coming to your university, to your campus. So, for instance, like my brothers, they live in Auburn, and I'm pretty familiar with that school in Alabama. So they have Auburn police, just like I'm sure UF has UF police. Just like I live Fort Myers, so we have Florida Gulf Coast University. They have their own police on campus. And in Auburn and FGCU, for sure, I don't know about UF because I haven't spent much time there on the campus, but in Auburn and FGCU, they're not security officers. They are special district, just like the fire department. They're recognized and fully vested police agency. So they have, the arrest powers just like any other jurisdiction, like a county or a local sheriff or, whatever. So you would definitely contact your campus police is probably a better way to say it. Any first responders, at least notify them that there was an incident, and then you're going to move on from there. if you're being proactive and you're being your approach to the situation is broad, then you're going to want to consider a higher level of response, or request a higher level of response, or hope that when you liaison with whoever's coming from the police agency or from law enforcement, that you express to them, hey, there's an active shooter or a suspected shooter somewhere on campus. So we need to find this guy or girl. In this situation, it's a 23-year-old young man. And then you go on to level 2 of the disaster. So what happens is at 9:30, at 8 a.m., this gentleman kills 2 people in the dorms, and then at 9:30, he goes into one of the buildings on campus, Norris Hall, and he opens fire indiscriminately on students, and he winds up killing 30 additional students and injuring a few others. As soon as law enforcement arrives, so as soon as the shooting happens, law enforcement is contacted that there's an active shooter on the campus. They respond heavily. This is after Columbine, so they're responding under the auspice that they're not looking to interrogate or do any sort of investigation. It's an aggressive response where they're going to show up on campus. They're going to identify and isolate the threat and then eliminate the threat if the opportunity comes. But as soon as the gentleman hears sirens and he realizes that law enforcement has responded, he took his own life. So the takeaways from this incident, for me, and I think what's relevant to talk about in this one, is as far as the response goes. So if you're one of the responding agencies, it's consider secondary devices. That's always something with the shooters. Consider other shooting teams or other opportunities for other shooters beyond the initial suspect. That it may be a way to bait responders to grow the population at the incident for a second or third or fourth, whatever, action to take out more people. Always have that consideration. But takeaway, so when this went down and it was done, one of the things that came from this, and I included it in some reading attached to my post, was there was a change in gun rights. And not so much rights, but in your application to request firearms. So if you do what in Florida we call a yellow sheet, I don't know if that's a national standard, but in Florida we call them yellow sheets. So when you purchase a firearm, there's a questionnaire, and you're required to answer that truthfully under the under the threat of being prosecuted for perjury and all the other things that come along with lying on a federal form. But at any rate, so it includes checkboxes, questions related to mental health and mental ability, where they didn't exist prior to this incident. The other thing that came from this incident was, so I'm an online student. I don't go to UF on campus. I live 3 hours away, but I consistently get messages on my phone if there's something going on campus. The funding and the mechanism and the legislation for that came from this. Previously, it was not a requirement. It was something that was a best practice for emergency managers and campus security on universities across the country. But post this event, it's a requirement, it's a mandate that they, in an appropriate time frame, alert people of any incident on campus. And what's curious about these open campuses, so like Auburn has public streets, UF, because I went up there for graduation, has public streets, public thoroughfares that go through the campus. They're required to report all of those sort of incidents on the geographical jurisdiction of the campus, not just landmarks. So if something happens on buildings you recognize or know to be part of the campus, the football stadium, the cafeteria, the library, and any of the various living buildings and student buildings. But if you have public thoroughfares, if you have public businesses that are on the university's property that they own, they have to notify you of this sort of thing. And then the last thing, as far as takeaways, we're also funding for, so there's no mechanism. Schools are not required to share information regarding student disabilities and those disabilities include mental health. So you can have a academic career somewhere, high school, or transfer from college to college to college, and you bring your transcripts with you. There's a mechanism now, and I think it's this Clery Act, and it requires colleges and universities. Oh, that's the one to send out the notifications. But there was a mechanism now with the schools to share, and it's not necessarily a violation of HIPAA or anything like that, because you're not reporting any medical issues, but students that require special help for depression and mental stress and a variety of mental conditions under the auspice that those are learning conditions. So you can share that information because it's a learning condition. That's the last bit I have for this. So I hope you take the time to watch my video, and I'll watch yours. And semester is winding up, so I hope everybody has a good holiday if I don't see you. And thanks for your time. Bye.